Paul George, the NBA suspended him 25 games for violating the league's anti-drug program.
Let's call it what it looks like. You take something to turn into a monster on the court, get caught red-handed, and then suddenly pivot the narrative to mental health. Paul George just got hit with a 25-game ban, and honestly, the timing feels less like a coincidence and more like a targeted strike. 1 second, he's facing the microphones, pouring his heart out about stress, anxiety, and his medication, and the next second, boom, the league shuts him down. But here is the dirty little secret that's getting swept under the rug. Word on the street is the league allegedly dangled a quiet little deal behind closed doors. Cooperate, and we'll go easy on you. Which begs the terrifying question, who exactly was the NBA trying to hunt down if they were willing to cut a deal with a superstar? We need to hit the brakes and dissect this because this isn't just a ticker tape headline. This is a disaster. This is franchise-altering chaos. We are talking about Paul George, a 9-time All-Star, a guy whose name is supposed to be synonymous with excellence, the same guy the Philadelphia 76ers handed over $200 million to in a desperate bid to save their championship window, and just like that, he is erased from the lineup for 25 games. Zero pay, no warning shot, no please explain, just gone. This wasn't a slap on the wrist, it was a knockout punch. This was a first violation suspension under the collective bargaining agreement's banned substances program, which screams one thing: the league is not messing around. The news broke on January 31st, 2026, and it hit with the force of a hurricane. It went into effect immediately, mere hours before Philly was set to clash with the New Orleans Pelicans that very same night. Picture this, you're taped up, jersey on, locked in for tip-off, and a suit walks in and says, pack it up, you're out for the next 2.5 months. That isn't just a disruption, that is psychological warfare. That kind of whiplash destroys a team's rhythm. It shatters the locker room, panic strikes the front office, and torpedoes playoff hopes in a heartbeat. Philly didn't just lose a body on the floor. They lost their closer, their $200 million safety blanket, and their dignity, and the league, they didn't even blink. Now, follow the smoke. The National Basketball Association treats these test results like state secrets. They never publicly name the specific drug. They hide behind confidentiality policies like a shield, but if you know the rule book, you can connect the dots. A 25-game suspension is the specific price tag for performance-enhancing drugs. We aren't talking about recreational mishaps or forgetting to fill out a form. And let's kill the internet rumors. Right now, cannabis has been off the banned list since 2023. So go ahead and scratch that excuse off your bingo card immediately. This is heavy stuff. Look at the timeline. Last Tuesday against the Bucks, PG went nuclear. 35 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 9 three-pointers. He looked unstoppable. And naturally, that performance earned him a random drug test, which led to a suspension by Saturday. Funny how that works, right? Whatever flag popped up on that test was serious enough for the league to move at light speed, stay silent, and protect the shield. That's why the whispers about snitching won't die, because when the gavel comes down this hard and this fast, there is always a darker game being played in the shadows. This isn't just about a player slipping up. This is about leverage, public image, and the NBA deciding what you get to see and what stays in the vault. And right now, Paul George is the one taking the public beating while the rest of the ugly truth stays buried deep. But wait, because the plot thickens. This story just took a hard left turn into PR mastery. Moments after the suspension news shattered the internet, Paul George dropped a statement through Shams Charania at ESPN, and let me tell you, every word was calculated. Paul claimed that he's been battling mental health struggles for years, and while seeking treatment for a personal issue, he accidentally took an improper medication. He owned it. He stood tall, took full responsibility, and said point blank that the mistake was on his shoulders. He apologized to his family, the Sixers organization, his teammates, and the fans, admitting he let everyone down. It was humble, it was sad, and it was perfect. He promised to keep his mental health as priority number 1 and vowed to return as a better player and a better man. Clean, calm, and carefully lawyered. No finger pointing at the doctors, no tantrums. On the surface, it reads like the gold standard of accountability. And to be fair, the man has receipts. Paul George has been undeniably open about his anxiety and depression, specifically during the horrors of the 2020 bubble and after those brutal playoff collapses. He has discussed it on his own podcast, putting his vulnerability on display for the world. So this mental health angle isn't something he just pulled out of a hat to save face. It has context, and that gives his story a heartbeat of credibility. But doesn't it all feel just a little too convenient? The timing is almost too perfect to believe. Just 3 days before the suspension dropped on January 28th, Paul George played like a man possessed against the Milwaukee Bucks. He dropped 32 points and drained 9 three-pointers in a massive win. 9 threes! That's not a good night. That is a video game stat line. Keep in mind, this is a guy who has been limping through the season looking like a shell of himself. He had only suited up for 27 games and missed 20, fighting nagging injuries and looking rusty. Then, out of nowhere, he looks explosive, confident, and sharp, like someone turned the clock back 5 years. And that kind of sudden miracle recovery, it always catches the eye of the league office. Even the locker room legends were raising their eyebrows at this one. You had Gilbert Arenas and his crew on the pod basically saying, "Nah, that ain't right," suggesting that vintage performance on the court was what actually tripped the silent alarm. Because here is the reality of the league. When a guy's recent track record looks washed, but the game film suddenly looks like a time machine to his prime, the league office doesn't applaud, they start asking hard questions, and once those suits start sniffing around, the scrutiny comes down fast and heavy. That is exactly where the rumor mill goes into overdrive. A lot of insiders believe that one monster game was the spark that triggered a random drug test and extra attention behind the scenes. Look, I am not saying it is hard proof, and I am not making wild accusations, but we all know the script. That is usually how this drama plays out. You get a suspicious spike in athleticism, eyes widen in the front office, the protocols activate, and whatever happened next clearly did not go Paul George's way. But forget the optics for a second, let's talk cash, because this is where the situation goes from embarrassing to absolutely excruciating. We are talking about that massive 4-year, $212 million bag he secured with Philly back in 2024. For the 2025 to 2026 season, his salary is sitting at a cool $51.7 million. Break that down, and he is torching about $469,000 every single game. You do the math, multiply that burn rate by 25 games, and you are staring at a financial crater. That is roughly $11.7 million in salary just vaporized. Gone. No appeals, no refunds, no grace period to say, my bad, one mistake, one suspension, and nearly $12 million exits the bank account. And let's be real, the clock is ticking on his body. Paul George turned 35 in May 2025, and his resume is already filled with surgeries, rehab, and mileage. Time is definitely not his friend right now. So now he is stuck watching from the couch, helpless, while his squad fights for playoff positioning without their third star. The suspension keeps him in street clothes until March 25th, 2026, which is deep into the home stretch. This isn't just a hiccup, it is a total momentum killer. It is financially brutal, professionally damaging, and carries a mental weight that would crush most people. And while the PR team is spinning a nice story about mental health and accountability, the timing, that sudden performance spike, and the league's silence have everyone looking sideways at the whole mess. Let's just cut the fluff and admit it. You are getting older. You are feeling the pressure of that max contract. You want to prove you are still an elite player for the Philadelphia 76ers. Maybe you took some enhancement juice to get that step back on the court, but when you got caught, you pivoted to blaming it on mental health. I mean, come on, let's be adults. That is not mental health. That is chemistry. That is science. The fact that he tried to deflect and make it a sob story about mental struggle was wild. Just own it, take the heat, and move on. Because honestly, Donnie, nobody would care in a week. The news cycle moves too fast. That would have been the end of it. But in this league, nothing this massive ever happens in a vacuum. When Philadelphia finally hosts the Chicago Bulls, that is the circle the date moment Paul George becomes eligible to return. But here's the kicker that makes this a nightmare. That leaves him exactly 10 games in the regular season to find his rhythm before the playoffs begin. 10 games. That is it. There is no runway, no margin for error, just straight out of the freezer and into the fire of pressure basketball. What makes it tragic is that when the suspension dropped, the Sixers were actually rolling at 26-21, sitting 6th in the East and riding a 4-game winning streak. The vibe was shifting. you had Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Paul George actually clicking on the floor. This team looked like a legitimate threat for the first time all year. Not just hype, not just potential on paper, but real contenders. And then snap, just like that, 1/3 of their big three vanishes for nearly 3 months. There was no slow fade, no transition plan, just gone. You really can't script a plot twist this cruel. Now, here is a crucial detail the casual fans might miss. The National Basketball Association's anti-drug program has a loophole called a therapeutic use exemption. Basically, if a player has a legitimate medical reason to take a substance that is normally on the banned list, they can apply for a pass. If approved, they can use it to get healthy without facing a penalty. It is a permission slip for meds. This happens all the time for guys needing ADHD treatments or other regulated prescriptions. But from everything we are hearing, Paul George never got that golden ticket. He took the medication without clearing it with the league office first, acting like the rules didn't apply, and that lazy technical mistake is what triggered the suspension. No paperwork means no protection and absolutely no safety net. And that is where the skepticism explodes. Paul keeps framing this as a complex mental health situation to gain sympathy, but notice he never specifies what medication it was or how exactly it violated the policy. He just calls it an improper medication and leaves it vague. That vagueness is doing him zero favors, because when you leave out the details, the internet starts filling in the gaps with their own theories. And that is exactly what happened. The reaction across the league was loud, immediate, and ruthless. You had media personalities, former players, and fans all jumping in the comments. And let me tell you, not everyone was buying the PR statement. Hosts Donnie and Joe over at Sports Grid went straight for the throat, questioning why a superstar with George's infinite resources wouldn't clear a simple medication first. Then you flip over to Inside the NBA, and even Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley were left scratching their heads, admitting this whole thing caught them off guard. Barkley, who never sugarcoats anything, definitely didn't start now. He pointed out that the league has relaxed the rules on recreational stuff over the years, so for them to drop the hammer on a substance now, it means it is serious. He straight up called the situation fishy, and when Sir Charles says something smells off, the whole basketball world listens. The man has been in the game way too long to miss the writing on the wall. And then you have Stephen A. Smith on First Take, absolutely losing his mind, screaming that this is the final nail in the coffin for Philly's championship dreams. And look, the man isn't wrong. You don't just casually lose a $50 million superstar for 25 games and act like the sky isn't falling. Even the former pros are jumping into the ring. Jeff Teague didn't hold back, openly wondering if those red flags should have gone up the second George went on that sudden, crazy scoring tear. But he also dropped a question that actually makes you think if these guys are taking meds strictly for their headspace and it's not making them jump higher or run faster, do they really deserve to get hammered this hard? That is the debate that is going to rage on for weeks. But let's be real, not everybody is buying the sob story. Over on the Speakeasy podcast, the gloves came completely off. They went straight for the jugular, accusing George of hiding behind vague medical talk and using mental health as a convenient shield to dodge the heat. Now, that is a heavy accusation to toss around, but it speaks to the skepticism brewing in the shadows when the official story feels incomplete. Then you flip over to Nightcap and you've got Shannon Sharp and Chad Ochocinco Johnson going toe-to-toe. Unc showed a little love, sure, but he kept circling back to one thing: accountability. Because here is the truth. You can feel bad for the guy and still demand he owns his mess. Those two concepts, they are not mutually exclusive. Meanwhile, Twitter turned into an absolute war zone. The memes were brutal, relentless, and coming in at 1,000 miles an hour, roasting George for how up and down his game has been. One viral post absolutely nailed him, joking, "Imagine violating the drug policy and you still can't hit a jumper. That is cold." Another clip showed him bricking a shot with captions asking, "How is that even scientifically possible? The internet takes no prisoners, and once the clowning starts, there is no stopping it." The paranoia got so bad, some fans started screaming for the league to test everybody, even King James himself, based on absolutely zero evidence other than pure vibes. But that is exactly how the mob mentality works. One domino falls, and suddenly everyone is a suspect. The speculation about what he actually took, it has been nonstop. Some folks are betting it's a stimulant, maybe something for ADHD that he forgot to get a permission slip for. Others think it is something way heavier. They're looking at his age, those wild swings in performance, and thinking maybe he tried to turn back the clock. Social media even christened him with a few new nicknames, and trust me, none of them are ones he is going to want on a jersey. It's mental health. Oh, it's just mental health. Listen, I'm telling you right now, you got a 41-year-old out there doing who knows what. Why are they doing this to him? They invested $50 million into his body. He does. But what is up with Paul? Paul can't do it, but he can't. Just no. You just cannot get caught. That is the whole game. You know how the NBA moves. They protect their assets. That is exactly what I said. We already had this whole conversation. The NBA protects their players. They are never going to leak the name of the substance. No, for sure. But how many games was it? How many games did Bobby, who was it, get hit for? Say it. 20? What? 25. 25 games. Remember last year when he got sat down? Oh man, I totally forgot about that. What was that even for? Analysts and insiders ripped George apart for not picking up the phone and calling his agent or the team doctors before putting anything in his system. And honestly, it is impossible to defend that. These guys have armies of medical staff, compliance officers, and league reps just one text away. When you are cashing checks for over $50 million a year, checking your meds isn't some optional side quest. It is literally your job. At the end of the day, this isn't just about a rule book. It is about judgment. One bad call, one lazy moment, one oversight, and the explosion destroys everything. And now, no matter how much PR spin they use, this cloud is going to hang over Paul George's head for a long, long time. But here is the part of the story that everybody keeps glossing over. When you have that kind of wealth, you can afford to make one simple phone call. You ask the league, you ask the doc, you ask the compliance guy. There is zero excuse for playing a guessing game with your career. And yet, that is exactly where we are stuck in the land of guesswork. Right now, nobody outside that room knows what Paul George tested positive for. The league has locked it down, and odds are that file is never seeing the light of day. People are throwing darts in the dark, synthetic cannabinoids, steroids, SARMs, peptides, maybe some exotic stimulant. But let's be crystal clear, we have zero confirmation. We are all just reading tea leaves here. The NBA keeps these secrets under lock and key, and honestly, that silence might be the only thing saving him from total humiliation right now. Over on Gil's Arena, the host brought up a point that actually makes a ton of sense. Players have been dancing with these gray area supplements for years. The rules are razor sharp, but the lines on the bottle, they aren't always clear unless you actively hunt for the answers. That doesn't give him a pass, but it explains why we keep seeing veterans guys who should know the drill walking right into this trap. Now, hold on, because this is where the story takes a dark turn that most people are too scared to touch. While the mainstream media is obsessing over what Paul George did, there is a much uglier rumor circulating in the basketball underground. Allegedly. This wasn't just a suspension and a see you later, according to a bombshell report floating around from Scrooge TV. The league supposedly offered Paul George a backroom deal. The word on the street? The league told him they could make this suspension disappear or at least shrink it down if he was willing to turn snitch and give up the names of other stars using the same stuff. According to that same explosive online post, he didn't just hesitate, he flat out refused. The word is he voluntarily chose to eat the 25-game suspension rather than rat out his supplier or teammates. That rumor alone set the comment sections on fire. Suddenly, you had legions of fans crowning him a martyr, respecting him for keeping his mouth shut and staying true to the code. But hold on, we need to pump the brakes, because this is where the story gets messy. Let's be real, the NBA's official anti-drug policy doesn't have a snitch clause that offers you a get-out-of-jail-free card. And look around, no major powerhouse, not ESPN, not the Associated Press, not even The Athletic has touched this angle. So right now, it's just smoke without the fire. But the fact that millions of people nodded along and said, yeah, that sounds right, tells you everything you need to know about the current state of trust in the league. There is a rock-solid belief out there that players operate like a brotherhood, and singing to the feds or the commissioner is the quickest way to get exiled from the locker room. It's the ultimate unwritten rule. You do not cross that line. The guys over at Gil's Arena broke it down perfectly. Silence isn't just about honor. It's about survival. When you keep the specific names of the substances out of the press, the player gets to hold the pen and write their own script. That is exactly how we end up with those vague, lawyer-approved press releases, just enough info to keep the league legal, but mysterious enough to keep the public guessing forever. But to truly grasp the weight of this suspension, you have to zoom out and look at the ugly history behind the curtain. The NBA's anti-drug program wasn't built just to be mean, it was a desperate survival tactic. We're talking about 1983. The league was on its knees. The 70s and early 80s were the cocaine era, and it was eating the sport alive from the inside out. Dark rumors from back then suggest that a massive chunk of the roster, maybe even the majority, was dabbling in the hard stuff. The NBA's reputation was in the toilet. Enter David Stern. When he took the throne, he knew he had to scrub the image clean. Arenas were empty, sponsors were running for the hills. It was a crisis. That anti-drug policy was the lifeboat designed to keep the entire business of professional basketball from sinking under the weight of its own bad habits. Fast forward to today. The system runs on Article 33 of the 2023 Collective Bargaining Agreement, and the math is brutal. Strike one, you sit for 25 games. Strike two, you're gone for 55. Strike three, pack your bags, you're done. Banned from the league with a slim prayer of reinstatement after 2 years, Paul George is officially staring down the barrel of strike one. The pressure is now suffocating. One more slip-up, and he loses more than half a season. A third mistake? That's a career death sentence. The league categorizes these poisons specifically. Drugs of abuse cover the heavy hitters, cocaine, LSD, opioids, and methamphetamine. Then you have the performance-enhancing stuff, steroids, HGH, peptides, and those sketchy synthetic cannabinoids. And yes, those synthetics are still strictly banned, even though the league finally chilled out and took natural marijuana off the prohibited list years ago. The testing is the stuff of nightmares, random, year-round, even in the off-season. They want blood or urine, and if you say no, that refusal hits your record just as hard as a failed test. Here is the wild statistic. Since 1986, there have only been roughly 42 total suspensions under this policy, with barely 13 tied to performance enhancers. That number is suspiciously low. We are talking about thousands of elite athletes grinding their bodies to dust over 4 decades. So either NBA players are the cleanest saints on the planet, or the testing protocols have some massive loopholes. And that is why this Paul George situation feels so heavy. It's not just about the lost games or the missing paycheck. He lost the benefit of the doubt. That shield is gone. Now, every silence looks like a cover-up, and every explanation sounds like an excuse. To make it even more cynical, ESPN's Bobby Marks crunched the numbers. The Sixers are actually going to save over $5 million in luxury tax because of this mess. That suspension dropped their payroll just enough to leave them hovering a little over $1 million above the tax line. It basically gifted the 76ers a golden opportunity to dodge the tax man this week without having to trade away a single player. Funny how that works out, right? There is a loud theory in the barbershops that the NBA doesn't actually want to catch the stars because suspending your moneymakers is bad for the bottom line. That conspiracy theory isn't exactly crazy, especially when you look at the ghosts of the past. Whenever the league decided to drop the hammer historically, the fallout was ugly, tragic, and left a permanent stain on the brand. Look at the legend of Mickey Ray Richardson. In 1986, the guy was banned for life after 3 positive cocaine tests. He was a 4-time All-Star, dropping nearly 15 points a night, a legitimate phenomenon, and just like that, his NBA life was extinguished. Sure, he was eventually reinstated, the first guy to ever get that second chance, but the damage was done. He never played a minute in the NBA again. Then you have the heartbreaker, John Drew of the Atlanta Hawks, another casualty of the drug wars, banned for life after he couldn't stay clean. This guy was a walking bucket, averaging over 20 points a game early on. He looked like the future of the franchise. And then, poof, gone. That potential evaporated overnight. The cocaine era didn't just take stats, it took souls. Maybe the most painful one to remember is Roy Tarpley. The Dallas Mavericks had a 7-foot unicorn who could do it all. But he couldn't beat his demons. Banned for life in 91, reinstated, then banned again in 95. It was a tragic cycle. He fought back hard, even suing the league under the Americans with Disabilities Act, claiming discrimination, but the gavel came down against him. But hey, not every story has to end in a tragedy, right? Some guys find a way back from the edge. You have to go back to 2006 to understand how low a career can sink. Chris Birdman Anderson banned from the league for 2 years. Methamphetamines, it looked like a wrap. The critics wrote his obituary right then and there, but the man didn't just fade away. He clawed his way back, rebuilt his entire existence, and helped LeBron James lift a championship trophy with the Miami Heat in 2013. It's the kind of redemption arc Hollywood wishes it could write. Fast forward to today, and that redemption story is starting to feel like a distant memory. The pattern emerging lately? It's ugly, and it's getting familiar. Look at the rap sheet. Tristan Thompson, slapped with a 25-game suspension in 2024 for ibutamoren and ligandrol. DeAndre Ayton, he got hit with 25 games back in 2019 for a diuretic classic masking agent move. Then you had John Collins sitting out 25 games that same year for a growth hormone peptide. Everyone's got a reason. Everyone's got an excuse. And just last year, Bobby Portis of the Milwaukee Bucks got hammered for tramadol. It's like a pharmacy out there. The guys over at Gil's Arena didn't hold back, drawing a straight line between Paul George and the Portis situation. The narrative is always the same. It was an accident, or I didn't know. And honestly, that is exactly where the fans start rolling their eyes. You can feel the skepticism in the air. A superstar gets busted, the PR team drafts a tearjerker statement claiming it was a huge mistake, and the league just shuffles along until the next guy gets caught. Rinse and repeat. But let's cut through the noise and talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. Because for them, this isn't just a headline, it's a grenade thrown into their season. Here is the twisted irony of the whole mess. Losing their star player actually gives the team a financial life raft. Bobby Marks over at ESPN crunched the numbers, and get this, the Sixers are going to save over $5 million in luxury tax payments while George sits in timeout. Philadelphia picks up a luxury tax variance credit of $5.8 to $8 million. That is exactly half of George's forfeited salary. That cash moves them from drowning in tax penalties to sitting just $1.2 to $6 million above the line. In the NBA, that is massive. It gives the front office the ammo to make trades without triggering those brutal apron restrictions. In plain English, this disaster might accidentally save their season. It opens up roster moves that were impossible 48 hours ago. Analysts are already buzzing that the Sixers could go poaching for role players from tanking teams to stop the bleeding. But let's be real, Coach Nick Nurse can't coach a tax credit. He has to win games. He is going to have to ride guys like Kelly Oubre Jr. into the ground. And you better believe Caleb Martin is going to be playing heavy minutes to patch the massive hole in the lineup. But all of this drama is unfolding against a very sensitive backdrop. The NBA isn't the league it used to be. Around 2018 and 2019, they launched a massive mind health initiative. They took it seriously. Since the 2019-2020 season, every single franchise is mandated to have a full-time, licensed mental health professional on the payroll. No exceptions. Players have access to headspace, wellness programs, and a support system that the old heads in the 90s could only dream of. The NBPA made sure of that. We watched guys like DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Love literally change the culture by opening up. They made it okay to not be okay. DeRozan went public about his depression in 2018. Kevin Love wrote that raw essay in the Players Tribune about his panic attack and started his own fund. These guys are heroes for that. Paul George has always given flowers to those guys. He has been a vocal supporter, even showing up in awareness campaigns. But that brings us to the jagged pill nobody wants to swallow, the uncomfortable question hanging over this entire suspension. Is Paul George actually fighting a mental health battle right now? Or is a serious medical issue being used as a convenient get-out-of-jail-free card after a failed drug test? It's cynical? Sure, but that's the world we live in. We may never get the real answer. Here is what we do know. He has gone for 25 games, he is lighting nearly $12 million on fire, and his team is left scrambling. And let's not pretend this is George's first dance with controversy. Rewind to 2013. The paternity battle with Daniela Rajic, that was messy. It played out in the tabloids with a judge ripping into him. To his credit, he fixed it. He reconciled. They got married in 2022. and they have a beautiful family with 3 kids. He turned that ship around, but then there was 2014. The Ray Rice tweets. George faced a massive backlash for some incredibly insensitive comments on domestic violence, even drawing heat from Larry Legend himself. George deleted the tweets and apologized. But you know how the internet works. Screenshots live forever. The damage lingered, yet this suspension feels different. It feels heavier. He is 35 years old. He's on a massive contract, on a team built to win times right now, asterisk. The timing is an absolute nightmare. George says he is going to use this time to get his mind and body right. That's the official line. But when he steps back on that hardwood, the game will give the final verdict. Until then, Philadelphia is stuck cleaning up the mess. And the rest of the league? They are grabbing the popcorn and watching every single move.